So today my kids and I went on a trip to the shopping mall, and I couldn't help but be drastically disheartened at the extinction of these shopping pavilions. I mean, I remember being a kid and the event that it was when you got to go to the shopping mall, whether you were a teenager and you just gotten your license and you were cruising and you were hitting the arcade or crushing the food court with your buddies, or if you were one of the unlucky ones that had to get taken by your mom there for dungarees and she's yelling at you while she's tugging on your waistband. The shopping mall always gave you memories as a youth. And like with most things that we held sacred once, they are slowly fading out of sight. And I can't help but wonder if 1986's shopping mall had something to do with this. Let's talk about it. We start this one off hot. We've got a thief. He's there after hours. He's in the mall and he's helping himself to whatever he liked. And I won't lie, that was one of those good dreams for me when I was a kid. That being said, we get something that rolls out of what I would like to call Dollar General RoboCop, and that is the security robot tracking this guy down. Now, the guy's bullets don't work on it, but we find out this is just a training video, part of a presentation that the owners of this technology are presenting to business owners located in the mall. He's got 3 of these things front and center on stage, and the guy giving the presentation looks an awful lot like Huey Lewis. And I'll never ever forget the day that I found out Huey Lewis dated Vanity. Broke my heart. This presentation is going down in a mall that is 7 floors high. And I remember being a kid having my 2-story mall and thinking I was a king running around and raising hell in that joint. Now, Huey Lewis winds up ending this presentation with the ominous remark, "Don't worry, nothing can go wrong." Famous last words. Funky intro music hits, shopping mall graphic, and then we get business commerce the next day. The place is busting, stores are full, and holy shit, we get Joey from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 coming out of the music store with records stuffed in the front of his shirt. Now, stealing from a store is one hell of a fall from grace for our dream warrior. And when he got into Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, he was just Freddy fodder, but we love and know him as Joey from Nightmare on Elm Street 3. What happened, man? So we bounce from store to store, and I love the nostalgia of it all. Seeing some of these old retailers that I used to love to duck into. B. Dalton Bookstore with all the magazines. Fangoria was my favorite, of course. And then we get to a pizza parlor where we instantly recognize 2 lovely young women, one of which is Barbara Crampton as Susie, and the other one is Kelly Mulroney as Allison. Then we go to a shot of the control room that oversees this entire mall. It controls everything, hence control room. But the thing about the 80s and the control rooms that they would show you is everything had perfectly square buttons that all lit up a different color. It looked like the control panel of the Death Star. That's how hardcore they went on this thing. Now, the story here is Susie is having a birthday party with her guy and 6 of their closest friends. 3 couples in total, and a blind date for Allison that goes by the name of Ferdy. Yes, his name is Ferdy. Now, speaking of slasher alum, one of our leads here is none other than Russell Todd, who plays Rick here, but played Scott back in Friday the 13th Part 2. And this birthday party that they're all excited to attend is happening inside the mall after hours. What could go wrong? Naturally, we get a lightning storm that naturally produces a bolt that hits the junction box on top of the mall. And we are led to believe this is what causes our friendly but firm security bots to turn into kill bots. The first victim is the guy that currently running the control room at that moment, and then another guy comes in shortly thereafter, but there's no body. So are we led to believe that these security robots figured out how to hide a human body? The second guy doesn't make it a whole lot longer than the first guy did. With the first 2 victims out of the way, the killbots then decide to go out on the floor and patrol the mall, and I couldn't help but pop when I saw the G.I. Joe toy display that one of these robots rolled right past. Now, the happiest time of my adolescence was putting those G.I. Joe vehicles together, having massive wars between them, the Thundercats, my WWF wrestlers. No better time. And then I remember how mad my parents used to get when they would have to buy me the Night Force vehicles or the Tiger Force vehicles when I already had the vehicles, but they were just adding a new paint job to all of them. We were buying them all over again. And it's like, you can't expect me to save the country with last year's vehicles. We have to keep our technology up to date. Come on, guys, get with the program. Now, Murray Futterman, the Murray Futterman from Gremlins, is a janitor in this movie. And he's grouchy, he's pretty grumbly, And you would be too if you had to clean up after kids all day. That amount of kids. I have 3, and I can barely do it. But Murray Futterman's here, and he's mad. And he's shortly thereafter approached by one of the robots, cusses at the robot, pretends he's going to hit the robot with a mop. And I can't help but think, while I'm watching this movie, please don't kill Mr. Futterman. Kentucky Harvester, Mr. Futterman. They end up killing Mr. Futterman, and they electrocute him in a very brutal and very disrespectful way, if we're being honest. Absolutely shameful. Hated it. As I mentioned in the last video, the 80s were a wild time, and this party that they're having here in the mall is absolutely no different because they're all in the same store, and they have some slight partitions between the couples, but basically they're all naked and banging in the same general area. And as they're doing that, Leslie loudly crosses the finish line, which causes Allison to make her move on Ferdy. They're having a good time, at least. So as a viewer, the way I saw this thing unfolding was there's 8 of them. So what's going to happen is one's going to go out for something, get picked off. The other's going to go out for something and get picked off. And we're just going to whittle them down that way. And that's how it starts out, because Mike heads out for smokes after the lovely Leslie requested, and then he gets off. And then Leslie winds up getting lasered in front of the other 6 while they watch. And then that threw me a little bit of a curveball, because I'm like, well, if there's 6 of these people, surely they'll be able to overwhelm or figure out a way to dispatch with these killbots, because they looked cool, and I don't know how I would deal with one of them, but they are a low rent version of what we got in Revenge of the Nerds that Lewis and Gilbert put together to alert one another if one of them had a girl in the room. They're not that serious. And just as I started to think that, I realized each one of these robots shot a different color of a phaser or a laser or whatever we want to call that thing that's firing out of their face. There's a pink one, there's a blue one, and I believe there's a green one. Loved it. I popped for that because it reminded me of Star Wars. It reminded me of The Last Dragon. You remember The Last Dragon with Shonuff and Bruce Leroy, and Bruce has got the gold, Shonuff's got the red. I love that sort of stuff. But when the robots attack, are they reaching out for a hug? It's really strange to me. The rest of the film is pretty much a cat and mouse, with the boys wind up being alone and the girls head off alone. They get separated because the girls go up in the air duct and the boys have to go arm up somewhere, and the girls eventually end up arming up somewhere, and they do their best, but eventually we get down to where it's just our nerdy couple left, and that's essentially the way all these things work. That's the horror formula. It's not so much a scary movie, but they did a good job keeping us entertained with all the things that you would look to for an 80s horror flick. Plenty of carnage candy, lots of nudity, cheesy puns. It's perfectly acceptable B movie. I enjoyed it, and it's only an hour and 15 minutes. It was a really easy watch. I liked the cast. I thought it was really great to see familiar faces from Friday the 13th, from Nightmare on Elm Street, from Gremlins, but they were all solid in there. All of the characters were pretty decent, and I'd have been fine with most of them living until the end, but that's not how these things work. Wasn't crazy about the killbots. Any strong part of a horror film has to be the antagonist and the killer, and these things were okay, but if I had to give them a grade themselves, I would say they're a C-. So not awful, but far from great. As far as a grade goes, I'm going to give this a 6.5 out of 10. The tricky part is, does it age gracefully or not? And by definition, aging gracefully means something that you're willing to watch again and again and again. And I will watch this movie probably again and again. I don't know how often. It's really middle of the road for me, but I will give it the nudge into the aging gracefully territory. It's something worth checking out. If you have a short window, just long enough to watch a long television show, this movie will fit right into it. And the characters are good enough, and the story's good enough. I mean, a shopping mall, there's so many things that go down in a shopping mall, and I really enjoyed some of the parts that we got in some of the newer movies like the Fear Street trilogy. The stuff that took place in the shopping mall I thought was really entertaining. You look at Stranger Things season 3 when they're in Starcourt Mall, I thought everything they did there was great. I love the fact that they set it there because malls were such an important part of 80s Americana. It doesn't get much better or bigger than that, and certainly the setting. I mean, there's so many different things you can do with a mall. That being said, this is Aging Gracefully. I'm Matthew Essex. Happy shopping, campers. I'll see you on the other side.